Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Multi-Music Technology. Today I'm having a look at the Novation / GForce Instruments bass station. The bass station plugin is, of course, based upon the original Novation bass station. The bass station was this farty little analog synthesizer knocking around in the 1990s when everything else was moving digital. I remember it working in a music shop as I did in the 90s. We had the rack and a keyboard version over there. If you're coming through the door, just go around the back of the keyboards. Over there in the corner in the racks was the bass station. And you could while away a many an hour when you weren't serving customers, farting around with the sort of tiny little knobs on the rack version. I seem to remember more than anything, but the sound was great. I mean, it wasn't the focus of the time in the 90s. No one was that interested except for that merry band of TB303 enthusiasts who were determined to create some sort of new sort of music out of all this old bits of tat. And so the bass station held its own within that environment, while around itself all these huge synthesizers were developing entire new digital forms of sound generation. It wasn't interested. It kept itself pure, simple, and I think the thing that would grab you about it is just that it sounded so nice immediately. Every other synth around it, you had to step through patch after patch after patch, trying to find that interesting sound that you wanted to use to demonstrate and to impress a customer with. Oh, listen to this great big combi sound of all sorts of stuff going on. But it took time to wind your way through all of the crappy sounds to get to something good. With the bass station, it was always there. All you had to do was grab the filter and you were in fun times immediately, without any bother. From the bass station, sometime later, we had the bass station 2, which I have down here. It's still an active member of my synthesizer community, and it's great. Novation have gone on to do lots of other things. I mean, I guess in many ways they tend to end up being more famous for the controllers, the launch pad stuff, the launch key stuff like this is here, more so than their synthesizers. Although, you know, the Peak and synthesizers like that they have out there, the supernovas of the past have definitely been landmarks to one degree or another. But the sound of the bass station, that original farty analog synth, if that's two oscillators fighting with each other over a couple of simple waveforms, somehow stays with us. Now, there has been a plug-in version before. I mentioned this to Novation, who said, hey, look, great, we've just put the bass station into software. Isn't that amazing? It's like, yes, you did that. You did that 20 years ago, I think it was. And I've got a copy of that knocking around somewhere, and I've used it a few times. And it's not bad, you know, it's not bad. And we're going, did we? We don't remember any of that at all. No, never heard of it. This is the bass station in software, they say. And so, all right, fair enough. Let's give it a go. But what they've done, most importantly, is collaborate with GForce. Now, GForce have produced some extraordinary software instruments. Most recently, they've worked with Oberheim and they've worked with ARP to produce some fantastic sounding things. So the technology and the know-how to go in and extract the analog circuitry sound and vibe and tone from these old instruments is something that GForce do particularly well. And that is why we need to forget about the other one, forget about the old one, you know. Nobody cares about that anymore. Focus on this one. Now, this new bass station plugin will come with any of the keyboards and bits of hardware you buy for them, I believe. Otherwise, it's available for about 99 quid or 49 quid as an intro, which is not bad for something of this quality. This is sort of Cherry Audio price range. And Cherry Audio do some great stuff, absolutely. But GForce, I think, just do it slightly better. So, I could talk about this for hours, of course, but you probably want to hear some sounds. Now, there's going to be lots of videos out there with lots and lots of sounds in, and I will have some too. That was funny for some reason. But also, I like to talk about stuff because I like to express an opinion. Otherwise, what's the point of me? I don't understand why I should just be playing sounds. You can go and listen to sounds anywhere. So I'll play some sounds. We'll have a look at a bit about how it works and see how much fun it is. I mean, a spoiler, I suppose. It's a lot of fun. I would think. And before anyone asks, this is not an iPad. It's a Microsoft Surface. It's a Surface, a desktop machine. It runs as a VST plugin or standalone. It's not an iPad app. This is running on a regular computer for making regular music for regular people. None of this iPad shenanigans. It's a Microsoft Surface running Windows. So this is the base station front end. It looks a lot like a base station. I mean, you can get rid of, if I can remember how, there you go, you can get rid of the effects section and have it just looking pretty much exactly like the base station of old. It's lovely, even down to the weird sort of gritty bits at the back of the rather lightweight plastic keyboard it came with. You've got all that going on, so the look of it is spot on, absolutely perfect. And what you get on the front panel is pretty much everything that you'd expect. Now, there's some extra shenanigans going on, some extra bits and pieces, some extra waveforms, sub-oscillators, noise, FM routings and things that weren't there in the original. And we will stumble upon all sorts of things. But I don't think the point is to say, oh, it must be exactly like the original. I think I've always felt that software brings a unique opportunity to just push the boundaries of what was possible. And because of that, we get these lovely little extras that, you know, we would have liked to have been there in the beginning if these things were available. You've also, of course, got polyphony, which just brings an entire different view, a different vibe, a different life to a synthesizer. I find that, I mean, again, I could talk about that for hours, you know, the monophonic, polyphonic thing, because they are different things. It's not the same to have a polyphonic synthesizer and just play it one note at a time. No, monophonically, you want to have that note stealing vibe, that fact that you can play notes within the envelope of a single trigger. Things like that are important in a monophonic synthesizer, and the base station did that really well. So when you add polyphony, it changes things. But thankfully, you have monophonic modes and unison modes and other bits and pieces that mean that you retain the exact vibe that you're after, and that's not lost in the elegance and luxuriousness of polyphony. See what I mean? Should we play another sound? Let's do that. Oh, there's that one. This, of course, is your classic acid. That's just superb. That nails it. That nails it right there. This is what this synthesizer was supposed to do, and that's it doing it. I mean, I'm only on the second or third preset, I think. I haven't really had a look, to be honest. Let's open these up a bit so we can see what's going on and see exactly what this is about. Now we have some distortion, chorus, delay and reverb all added in there, which you can hear pumping around the sound. It's got a drive, like adding on a boss pedal to it. Just fantastic. Let's randomize ourselves in somewhere else. It has a large preset engine, something like 300 presets or something stuffed in there. Of course, all made by very, very posh, very capable people, which is nice. We like that. There's a lot to go through. I mean, I'm currently in the... What section am I in? I don't even know. Some kind of bass type section. Not entirely sure. Maybe I'm just going through all of them one at the time. Who knows? We could just pick something. But with the way that GForce have recently actually upgraded their preset engine, if you like, you can now tag things in all sorts of categories. You can search for particular sounds, favorite things. It's now very developed. It was something that wasn't very good on previous GForce instruments. It was the one thing that was letting them down, I felt, a few instruments ago, but it's something that they've really now sorted out. So I can, for instance, go into pads, if we want to look at a little bit of polyphony, and select something in there, and that's going to be a lot more intentional. They're really nice. So it's changed and developed and evolved our precious little bass station, a gorgeous little simple-minded dual oscillator little farty analog synth, into something quite dreamy, quite lovely, quite loquacious. Is that a useful word? There's a random button. I wonder what that does. Should we try it out? Random. Is that going to give me a random sound from within my category? I think so. So let's try arpeggiators. Hit random. actually, that's really a superb little feature. Because, you know, when you have a large selection of presets, as you often do on these software synths these days, you can spend just a long time tapping through, one after the other, trying to get through what feels like an endless wave of different sounds, never entirely sure that you instantly like something and never spending the time. Introducing the random button, it just means that you don't feel like you're going through a list. I'm just going to try another sound. And it sort of automatically makes me want to stay here as opposed to just troop through the next one. I mean, there's that too. Really, really nice. Starting to get flavours of the Bass Station 2 in there now. So let's head back into basses. Let's close that so you can see what's going on. So there's a lot of modulation and possibilities going on because GForce has built in a cross modulation system, an X modulation system, where every single parameter can be modulated with its own LFO and envelope. It's quite a lot of modulation that, you know, it's very easy to get lost in that sort of level of thing. So what I think we'll do is let's initiate a patch, start from something really basic, and just start modulating and sort of see where we get to. Does that sound like a good idea? So to do that, I open up the browser again. There's an init patch down here, bottom left, which is great. That's another useful thing. You know, you almost get the impression that somebody's thought this through, because so often on a software synth, it's trying to find the init, the initialized patch, and it's lost somewhere in some menu somewhere. Having a big button, because that's something that you want to do, I think there's two schools of thought, of course. Maybe you're just the sort of person who likes to surf their way through presets. That's fine, enjoy yourself. But myself, and maybe people like me, like to start with something pretty basic so that we can then just start to build. I mean, I also like taking complex sounds and playing with those and developing those further. But to start with something simple and then start to play is really nice. Now I think there's a hold, so I can let that ring while I fiddle with a few things. Now I'm using the launch key keyboard here, which is very conveniently mapped to a few bits and pieces, sort of automatically. So I've got my filter, for instance. I then also got envelope and mount going to it, which isn't going to be important at the moment as we're droning. But I could bring in an LFO, just the built-in LFO, not the XLFO, not the cross LFO. This is the regular one, which is up here, which, funnily enough, gives me the next control on. A little bit of that. Bring in oscillator 1 sub. Then if I go to my second bank, I can start moving the detune on oscillator 2. Bring in some noise. Don't know that I fancy that. Then the other bits are into the effects. I'm just going to go back to my filter. It's also very touchable, very touch control orientated, so I can get in there and start to move things about. Would it do two things at once? Sort of, but it doesn't like it a whole lot, but it will do two things at once, so you've got full touch control over that. Take the hold off. I put some delay onto the LFO. It will then come in a little bit later as like tremolo. Let's add some release to the envelope. I'll take that sub out, I think. So that's a basic sound sculpted by an absolute master. What we can do now is add some effects to that. We've got this bank of effects at the top. We've got a high pass filter. It's not my thing. I'm not a high pass filter kind of guy, so I'm going to completely ignore that and go straight into distortion, which is something I am a bit more of. How do you turn it on, I wonder? Can I get my finger? Yeah, I can get my finger in there on the tiny little dot. Now the distortion is somewhat overwhelming, I have to say. It takes your sound, which is sounding like a normal synth, and it steals so much of the top end. Now over here on the right hand side we have a little oscilloscope that replaces the modulation section over here that I haven't even noticed because of the oscilloscope being over it all the time, which I think is a slightly weird design thing. Could they not have stuck it somewhere else so you can see all this? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to see what the waveform does when you put that distortion in and out. I don't think that's going to be answered just now, but it takes all of the tone off, which you then kind of have to put back in. Maybe need to bring the mix down a little bit, then add some drive, and then maybe then it's starting to find itself. Alright, bit of chorus, if I can find the dot. Just going to bring that down a little bit. Definitely nice. Bit of delay. Finally, let's whop on some reverb. That's turning into something pretty damn epic, I think. Now, I could change the mode into something else. Auto glide. Poly, here we go. lovely. Really, really nice. So from an initialized patch into something pretty epic. I think that's a lovely testament to how well this synthesizer reacts and feels and pulls you through to an evolution of a sound. It's nice. It's nice to work with, even when you're not. I've only had this for a little while to try out, so I'm not particularly deeply familiar with everything that it does. But I'm finding my way so easily, so intuitively, that I feel completely at home. Completely at home. So the XLFO then, what's that about? Well, it's simply about selecting a parameter and giving it some. I mean, that's it really. I mean, I could select the oscillator mix, for instance, from oscillator 1. I can add some LFO to that. So that's now wanging about, although that doesn't animate the knob itself, which is is a shame. I like to see knob animation with modulation in software, but we are getting this rather nice display, which is showing us what the LFO is doing. It's re-triggering, you can see that. You can have that in immediately, or you can make it delay like I did with the other LFO. You've got all these shapes over here. Really nice. You can introduce some randomization to that, some sample and hold rather. And that's only sticking in one bit of modulation. I also have an entire envelope I can introduce to something else if I want. Now, I'm relatively simple when it comes to synthesis, and I already have two envelopes and an LFO to run into the base station from the base station itself, and actually for the most part I'm quite happy with that. But having the additional power of this additional LFO, which you can run into anything, gives you an enormous amount of potential for sound design and developing different sounds that you haven't thought of. For people who like life more complicated than me, perhaps. And if you wanted something else affected, you just select it. I've now got filter resonance. Why don't I stick an envelope onto that? Because that's something you can do. Let's try that. Stick the attack up. So you now hear the resonance being pushed through the envelope. And you can see that on the little display. Just going to give it a little shift, I think. So there you go. There's the modulation section, a little bit of the effect stuff going on, the general gist of it, polyphonic, monophonic. And one last place to have a look at before you should then go off and buy it, I suppose, is the ARP sequencer side of things. So this is a built-in arpeggiator and sequencer. It's pretty cool, I think. It does exactly what it says it should. Stick on ARP. Oh, get it right. Stick on ARP, for instance. If I turn this back into a monophonic thing, so stick hold back on. So in the ARP you've got various modes. Let's bring some of the clarity back, shall we? You got swing. How fast it's going, how many octaves it's been involved in. And then you've also got probability. So, a decent arpeggiator which does it, pretty much exactly what you want to do. Of course, you can use your arpeggiator in your launch key if you have one too, which has mutate and rhythm gating patterns and stuff going on. So the combination of using one or the other, or both together, is going to be quite interesting, I think. The sequencer, on the other hand, is, as far as I can see, 16 steps. Probably a lot more. I could probably change that. I haven't really had a look. But suffice to say, you can hit record and then stick a load of stuff in, and then that will then trigger on a note. And we'll go through whatever octave settings you've applied to it as well. You can apply a scale, you can restrict and put in velocities and slides, probabilities per note, and all that sort of stuff. One last thing, the macro knobs. There's two knobs down here which you won't always spot immediately, and they do nothing at all because I haven't attached them really. Let's turn it off for a moment. Let's go back to my keyboard. So with a macro knob, you can essentially use it to control multiple parameters. So it's got a little plus next to it. I think if you're right, you take the plus and you stick it on something. I can stick it on the filter, and then it's now should be controlling the filter, is it? Hang on, let me do it with a mouse in case I've got that wrong. So let me take that over there, I put it there, and then right click to drag the amount. That's the thing that I was missing. It's a right click drag, so difficult to do with your finger. So I've put that on the filter. I'm also going to stick it on pulse width there, stick that on. So now hopefully my macro is controlling both the filter and the pulse width. Tells you how many things you attached it to, and you can easily remove them and add other things by dragging stuff to it. So if we go through a few more of the some presets, let's go for some leads this time. Maybe something a bit more like that. That's macro 1. That's connected to 4 things. Macro 2. I've got these knobs mapped to it automatically because it's a launch key. So if I have a look, see what that's attached to. So a bit of an envelope thing, and the envelope and the filter. There we go. So if I get the arpeg going here, I can then change the macro as it's playing back. So the idea is that you can affect quite big changes with a single knob twist. So there we go. That is the bass station. That is pretty much all I can tell you about it. It's packed full of presets, it's packed full of this lovely, lovely sound. GForce seem to have captured it quite brilliantly and are offering, you know, a decent synthesizer experience in software that very much pulls in everything about its hardware. It pulls in all of those vibes and those thoughts and those feelings you get when interacting with hardware, particularly when you match it up with a MIDI controller that's got a few knobs on it that you can map to knobs and bits and pieces within the software. It does give you a very responsive way of playing with it. That's a very unimpressive sound. It has hits and stuff as well. More vibe. That's an interesting knob. More effects. I keep discovering new things within here, which is nice. It's offering quite a lot. I like it. I mean, if I compare it to something else I reviewed recently, which is the Moog Mariana, I think it was. The Mariana was fierce and thick and treacly at every turn. It was, analog smushed with analog smushed in again, and gave you this enormous sort of chest thumping sound. The bass station is slightly more polite, I would say. It's got the distortion in there, which I think once you've worked out exactly what it's doing can be a good way of boosting and tearing at that sound. But overall it has a mellow feel, I think. The filter in it is nice. It's gooey, it's pleasing. It's not the sort of thing necessarily which is going to immediately rip your head off. I think it gives you a lot of scope for much softer, more exploratory, much more interesting, evolving and enticing sounds, which is interesting. I think in some ways we can roll ourselves into too much of this analog, so it's just all this one thing, and it's a sound that just completely covers the entire frequency spectrum and dynamic of your music, and it's only the low pass filter which is just making room at the top for something else to exist. I think with the bass station it's more nuanced than that. You have a lot more scope for sound. It's not quite so overwhelming. It's not going to completely dominate necessarily in a mix unless you want it to. I'm sure now if I choose a particularly gnarly lead, that will completely undermine everything that I've just said. No, I don't think so. One thing I will say is that the ARP and Sequencer settings are all saved with the preset, with the patch. So you can't like set an arpeggiator going or sequencer going and then try another sound with it. At least I've not found a way of doing that yet. And there may be a way of holding and then changing a sound without it changing, taking that bit with it, if you see what I mean. Or maybe you have to copy and paste it from one place to another. I don't know. All I can say is that intuiting my way through, whenever you select a new patch, your arpeggiator or your sequencer stops and is no longer there. You have to turn it back on again, and if there's a thing, there's no sequence error unless it's a sequence which is saved with the thing. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I'm getting at? The bass station from Novation. Hope that was helpful. In the meantime, go and make some tunes.